Yes, we are live. Welcome in. It is the Fantasy Sanctuary. It is me, Tom Strachan. It is best ball season. It feels so good to finally say that the draft, it's gone. Those dynasty nerds, they've had their time. Now it's best ball season, well and truly. Let's take a second to just acknowledge that right now, there is over $30 million of prize money available for best ball drafts. You look at what Drafters has got going on, Underdog, what they've got going on with Best Ball Mania 4. FFPC, and then, of course, DraftKings, always slightly late to the party, but this week they launched. And it's fair to say that they've surprised a few people. You know, they've come in here with the $10 Milli Maker, which pretty much everyone who's looked at the prize structure has said, this is a good contest. Yes, the rake is a lot heavier than some other sites. You know, it's 15% of entries into this just disappeared. DraftKings take them for themselves. In contrast with places like Drafters and Underdog, where that's about 11%. But then you look at the prize structure, and we've got 1 million up top. But if you finish inside the top 10, you are guaranteed $100,000 or more. If you finish inside the top 100, you're getting 10K or more. That being said, the final is 1,400 people, so it is pretty difficult when we get there. You know, you're either going to need to hit perfectly, or like I tweeted out earlier, the winning roster last year it's just kind of hard to decipher what went right for it, really. It just hit the nuts. They only had a single quarterback stacked with a wide receiver. It was Russell Wilson and Jerry Jeudy, which, you know, if you'd said in week 6, Russell Wilson and Jerry Jeudy are going to win someone $1 million, you might have been pretty pessimistic. They had 3 Eagles players without Jalen Hurts, naked Trevor Lawrence and naked Jacoby Brissett, Jordan Love on the bench taking zeros all season long. So, yeah, how much of best ball do we really know? Can we really solve it? Well, that's what we're going to try to do. This is going to be the winning draft right here, Sunday, May 7th, 9 p.m. UK time. Book it. We're going to jump into one. So if you're in the chat right now and want to jump in with me, let's go. See how many people we need. Oh, there we go. Bang on. Just need a completely new draft. So I'm going to tweet this one out. See if anyone wants to jump in. For those who haven't drafted already on DraftKings, it's always a little bit of a surprise where certain players go in relation to sites like Underdog or sites like FFPC. But there's a lot of fun to be had. Got Stephanie in the chat. Everybody should be wishing her a happy birthday. She'll be streaming later on Fantasy and Frames. You should all be checking out there. And we've got Will, who's a very clever guy. Excellent guest to have sitting in the chat with us tonight. Let's see. These have been filling pretty quickly so far. I think, you know, over 25,000 entrants, which, given it's only been a few days, is really impressive to see. When DraftKings launched early last year, it was quite slow, and it really took a little bit of time to get going. I think what we're seeing is at the minute, DraftKings are definitely letting this contest sit there and breathe. And there's the 555 Milli Maker as well, which is even better payout structure if you're ready to hit the high stakes. But there's no doubt that best ball for DraftKings has become more of a priority this season. So we will see more contests for $3 ones, for $4 ones, which were really nice last year. We're going to see more of those, and it's going to be really good. Right, we're up to 9 out of 12, so we shouldn't be waiting too much longer. Got Chris in the chat, very smart guy, very, very savvy drafter. We'll watch out for him. I'm sure he'll be in there. You'll recognize his DraftKings username, Death Angel. But yeah, so this is kind of the kickoff of the best ball show for us on the Fantasy Sanctuary. This one tonight, obviously, I'm flying solo. But in the coming weeks, we've got some really good guests coming on, people who you'll definitely recognize, some of the smartest minds from the best ball world. And we're going to talk all kind of things from best ball, whether you have never played best ball before or whether you're max entering 150 entries into this contest. There should be something for everyone on this one, and really excited to get going. So we're just waiting for one more to get going now. If you're in the chat, let me know if you're in the draft as well. Hopefully we'll get going in just a second. Stuck on 11 out of 12. Would you believe it? Give that a little nudge on Twitter. So yeah, so if you haven't played on DraftKings Best Ball before and you're kind of seeing this new contest that everybody's really talking about, it's kind of worth pointing out differences between other sites. If you're on FFPC, you should be familiar with the fact that this is it's PPR like FFPC. Obviously, on Underdog, it's half PPR. So there are some differences in terms of values of pass catches and stuff like that. But also, you've got little differences like DraftKings, much like their best ball, much like their DFS product. It's full PPR, and you get the 300-yard bonus for quarterbacks passing, and you get the 100-yard bonus for players in the receiving game or the rushing game. Obviously, for pass catchers and running backs, that's a fairly often occurrence for those who are good at it. For those who aren't good at it, that can really bump their value. But in terms of the quarterbacks, like last year in 2022, there were 93 different instances where a quarterback passed for 300 yards or more. And that can really make up the difference between the dual threats and those who are the pocket passers. I mean, Jared Goff last season had the third most 300-yard games of any quarterback, only behind Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. So if you had Jared Goff in a best ball team, his value really, when he hit those 3 points bonuses, it really spiked and it really helped a lot. Patrick Mahomes, he was on a different level. He had 10 games of 300 passing yards. Josh Allen 6. So those guys really, they can do it on the ground and they can do it through the air. And if you can hit on them, it kind of makes sense why we're seeing them being drafted quite early at the minute. I don't draft off my rankings. I do have my rankings are available on my site, nflbestball.co.uk, or on Fantasy Pros as part of the expert consensus rankings. But I like to see ADP. I feel like that's the best way to go with things. I am using Spike Week's draft board add-on that you can see here. I'll flick to that in a minute. But at the 102, typically I would be quite happy taking a wide receiver and going 0 wide receiver. But I really don't, 0 running back, but I really don't enjoy how things are going wide receiver by about rounds 3 to 4. It gets quite messy. So you kind of have to lean fully into one strategy or another strategy at the minute. We'll see what this person's going to do. It looks like they're going to time out with the first pick. So what did they do? They went pull up Spike Weeks. There we go. And you can see they took Christian McCaffrey at the 101. At the 102, I'm taking Justin Jefferson every time. I mean, why would you go away from that? He had so many great games last season and so many games where he was picking up a 100-yard bonus, as well as in his PPR format where he's just racking up the catches. And it feels sustainable for Justin Jefferson. Obviously, Adam Thielen's no longer there. We saw what he was like when this offense was running through him and TJ Hawkinson. And for all we might want to rag on Kirk Cousins, he knows what to do with the ball in his hands when it comes to getting the ball to Justin Jefferson. So I'm quite happy to lean on that. Justin Jefferson is my wide receiver 1 this season. After that, I'm kind of leaning towards Cooper Kupp. I think Jamar Chase is incredible and his ceiling weeks are fantastic, but there seems to be a little bit of, can you always count on him to deliver those weeks? There was times last year where defenses rolled more coverage onto him than they had perhaps the previous year. And it just seemed like you were kind of counting on one of T. Higgins or Jamar Chase to really deliver. Down the stretch, Jamar Chase absolutely dominated when he came back from injury. Like, he was seeing double-digit targets in every game. I think he had like over 25% target share pretty much throughout the playoffs. But part of me just worries that if the Bengals do commit to T. Higgins, then there are going to be weeks where Jamar Chase is really fighting for that dominant target share. But Justin Jefferson, yes, they brought in Jordan Addison, who's a really promising rookie, and I really like Jordan Addison. And, if he falls to me, he'll fall to me in this draft. But outside of him and TJ Hawkinson, the competition is definitely a tier below where they are with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So that first round's kind of played out pretty much as you'd expect at the minute. Bijan Robinson, seen him going as high as sort of 6, 7, 8, but it falls to 9 here, and that's fine. He's my RB2, and it seems to be the consensus now that he's going to be the RB2 this season. Austin Eckler makes a lot of sense as the RB3. I think we might see a bit of pushback on that, depending on how his contract situation plays out, and also there's the situation that last year he was playing a lot of time when Mike Williams or Keenan Allen wasn't involved, so it wasn't exactly the same. And this year, we're really going to see it all. And we've got Rich in the chat. JJ is the 101. Fully agree, of course. And is that a Stein? It's not. It's not a Stein. No, it's just a glass tankard. But next time I'll bring out the glass boot that I got from Munich and use that for my draft, shall we? Seeing Jalen Hurts going off as QB1 there. I mean, it makes sense. Madison Parkhill, formerly a Rotoviz, was putting out some tweets last night about how we're seeing these elite quarterbacks start to bottom out a little bit, and their value, their ADP recedes slightly on underdog at the minute. So I think by the time we get to sort of June, we are going to see some players like some of this elite quarterback tier drop down into the third round. What tends to happen is a lot of the casual drafters will roll in and they'll start adding in, bringing the running backs slightly higher. And at that point, it's normally the quarterbacks who just dip slightly. That's what we saw last season, and it wouldn't surprise me if that's what we see this season as well. So we've got one pick away. Jalen Waddle at the top of the queue, Nick Chubb, Chris Olave, Breece Hall. I'm going to lean into Nick Chubb here. I think he's somebody that it's a little bit funny to see him kind of being hyped by a lot of people this year after last year. He wasn't very fashionable, but now that Kareem Hunt's out of the picture, everybody's slowly waking up to the fact that, okay, well, Nick Chubb is going to give you 100-yard rushing game after 100-yard rushing game. And he doesn't even need to be that good at catching the ball. He has the chance to do some of that. We're going to carry on, though. Like, I'm going to treat Nick Chubb as a late anchor running back. I'm going to push on with Devonta Smith. Love me some Devonta Smith. I don't care that I don't have Jalen Hurts. We'll move back to the draft board, and you can see, so nothing too crazy, but this range at this time, when you're drafting this early, it's really interesting to kind of consider flipping the build as such. So if you're somebody who you've read about Hero RB or Anchor RB or anything similar, where normally Anchor RB would be in the first 2 rounds. Here with the ADPs of players like Ramondre Stevenson, or let's see, which of the running backs we've got, Breece Hall, if you believe in him coming back, or Jahmyr Gibbs. And instead of taking them in the first 2 rounds, you take wide receiver, or wide receiver quarterback, and then you take your running back in the third. Then you kind of flip the build slightly, but then adhere to the overall strategy. So then stay away from running back for a few more rounds. Will's question here, where would you be comfortable taking Derrick Henry before Chubb? Personally, I find it really hard to take Derrick Henry, and I know this is what we do every season, and then Derrick Henry makes us look foolish, but it's hard to escape the fact that I think Derrick Henry's going to be 28, 29 this season. They brought in Tajay Spears. That Titans offensive line, yes, they added a first-round pick to it, and yes, they're trying to build through the trenches, but it just feels like this Titans team could absolutely be a mess. Like, if Ryan Tannehill gets traded before the season starts or before the trade deadline, what are we talking about for this Titans team? Are we talking about a bottom 5 team in the NFL? I think it's entirely possible, and it just doesn't seem to make too much sense to really lean heavily on Derrick Henry in those situations. And if you put in Will Levis in there, who, yes, he's not a classic dual threat, but he can move with his legs, is he going to check the ball down at Derrick Henry as much? Or if you put in, God forbid, Malik Willis in there, what does that do to the offense? We saw it last year, and it wasn't very pretty. Rich's question here, are you concerned about the Hall injury? Anchor RB with him as your one seems scary. It definitely does, but this is the time to kind of embrace a little bit of danger like that. So, you can look at somebody like Breece Hall and say, why is Breece Hall's ADP in the mid to late 3rd round? And it's because of the injury. Now, Breece Hall, I believe, had a clean ACL tear. He didn't have any of the kind of damage that we saw to like J.K. Dobbins when he messed up his PCL, MCL, all this kind of stuff. But the same for Javonte Williams, which is why we're hearing Javonte Williams could miss, up to the entire season. Everything we've heard from Breece Hall suggests that it's clean and he could be back in time. Of course, there are the kind of rumors that the Jets had Verizon on Jameer Gibbs. They had Verizon on, other running backs. And then they took Israel Abanikanda. Got it. So yeah, you could say perhaps the Jets are playing things a little cautious, but I think they have to do because they put all the chips in on Aaron Rodgers. They need players, don't they? They need to be ready to win no matter what. And it could be that in 2 months' time, we're seeing all the hype videos of Brees Hall. He's out there, he's running, he's cutting. And it's like, okay, he's not going to go on pup. So there's that element to it. And then there's also the element that we're not playing for week 1. We're playing for week 17 here. Like, you can take zeros on your team. The guy who won it all last year, Jordan Love, took a 0 on his team the whole year. I believe Pat Crane's $2 million team on Underdog, one of his players took a zeros for a substantial period of time. So we can take those zeros. It does feel scary to do it. But if you're taking someone like Brees Hall, why not pair him with Smadgy Perine? This was something I saw on Twitter earlier from Hilo FF, who's a great follow, really busy in the DFS streets and a very clever guy. He was talking about Alvin Kamara specifically, but he was saying if you pair him with Smadgy Perine, then there's a good chance that even if Kamara gets suspended, perhaps Smadgy Perine is covering during that period of season for Javonte Williams and you end up being fine. So yeah, perhaps Brees Hall and Smadgy Perine makes a lot of sense. Coming up with 4 picks away, so 2 wide receivers, 1 running back. It's not a lot of fun in the 4th round, to be honest. I'm not wild about an awful lot of the picks that kind of come up here, but let's see. We've kind of got DJ Moore. We've got George Kittle, who's a bit of a fade for me. I know both me and Rich were on the idea that he's going to be hit with heavy touchdown regression. Justin Herbert goes a couple of picks before us. That would have been one which I would have liked. I'm probably not going to go with Amari Cooper if he makes it. No. So we'll be back up in another moment with another pick. So let's see. I found myself taking a lot of Jerry Jeudy lately, but I'm not wild about it. Let's take Keenan Allen. I think, yes, we've got Quentin Johnston there now, and obviously Mike Williams, but Keenan Allen was fantastic at times last year, and I'm kind of quite comfortable taking him as my wide receiver 3. And then here we go on the turn. So you can see that Mike Williams and Trevor Lawrence went just there. And I'm going to take Joe Mixon. I've not taken Joe Mixon anywhere yet. And yes, I do. Part of me worries that he's going to get suspended and it could be quite messy, the situation he ends up in. But Zach Taylor committed to Joe Mixon. The team didn't really go out and draft anyone. They really seemed to want to put the ball back in Joe Mixon's court. And Joe Mixon feels like somebody, if the NFL don't suspend him, his ADP could be going up by 2 rounds, 3 rounds? He could easily be a round 3 player in a couple of months' time. So let's see. So we've got James in here. Hear me out. Go Trey Sermon. Zig when they zag. Now, I was about to talk about how James is one of the smartest guys I know and often talks me into smart ideas with best ball, but might have to time him out for that one. Will saying DJ Moore hype vid today. I haven't seen that one. I saw an Odell Beckham video of him looking very good, but my Twitter feed might be just heading slightly more towards Odell Beckham than DJ Moore these days. So let's see. So far you can see we don't have any particular extreme builds. You can see this is the Spike Week overlay I've got on here, which allows you to see a DraftKings draft board, which isn't very usual. We've got the 5 wide receiver start for Caldwell at 103. That's a really nice team. That's definitely a team I would be happy to draft. But we don't have anyone who's kind of gone too heavy on running backs. Down at the end here, real on the F. Austin Eckler, Jalen Hurts, Travis Etienne, Justin Fields. It's not a build I would start with personally. You've put an awful lot of resources into quarterback early, but like we talked about earlier, things get a little weird on DraftKings, and perhaps that's what you need. I think it's because DraftKings don't publish their data in the same way that Underdog or FFPC do. It's kind of hard to really know what's the absolute nuts in this situation. Like, we've got the data from the winning tournament, and you can pour over that and we can look into, like, I can tell you that the average build in the 2022 final was 2.6 quarterbacks, 5.8 running backs, 8.3 wide receivers, and 3.1 tight ends. But last year was a year where you could get away with not investing a huge amount in the running back position. We saw Zero RB won $1 million in the underdog regular season prize. That was one which King Capital, he had a pure Zero RB team. And as somebody who loves Zero RB, that was great to see one of those kind of teams take it down. So here we go. We've got Chris on the corner, Deft Angel. Very nice start. CD Lama, Imran St. Brown, Mark Andrews, Christine Kirk, and Chris Godwin. I've been taking quite a lot of Chris Godwin myself. I think whilst it's true that Baker Mayfield, I don't think he's ever supported a top 20 wide receiver. Chris Godwin, to me, feels very much like Jarvis Landry in the seasons where he was managing to be productive with Baker Mayfield under center. And, you can probably contrast Mike Evans more to Odell Beckham, and that's very much feels like quite a risky pick. So in on Godwin, but less so on Mike Evans. So we've missed the boat on the elite quarterbacks, which is a shame. I would prefer to be having one of those, but they go so early at the minute, it gets very tricky. And I think you'll all know me that I'm going to have plenty of Lamar Jackson anyway, so it's nice to kind of build something out without Lamar for once. It would have been very easy to tap Lamar and Mark Andrews at that 2-3 turn, but then I would have gone Justin Jefferson, Lamar, Andrews, and then you kind of counted on Keenan Allen to be your wide receiver 2 instead of Devonta Smith, which just doesn't feel quite as strong to me. 4 picks away, seeing Kyle Pitts sliding down there, and it feels like everybody's kind of hung up a little bit on Marcus Mariota and how bad he was for that game. But Kyle Pitts had one of the best rookie tight end seasons of the past 10 years. You go back and look at the stats, and yeah, the touchdowns weren't there. I think he had one when the Falcons came over and played the Jets in England, and then he didn't score another touchdown until the Falcons were in it was Kyle Pitts in the Pro Bowl. So I definitely don't mind him. So I'm going to take him here. You see, he's not somebody I'll be aggressively over market on, but I do like the chances of Kyle Pitts having a bounce back. See on the turn there, that's kind of started a little bit of a tight end run between Dallas Goedert, Kyle Pitts, Darren Waller. And then back to myself. I'm going to reach down the draft board a little bit here for Marquise Brown. I think Marquise Brown, the moment that DeAndre Hopkins gets moved, and I don't put any stock into the fact that the Cardinals are saying that they're not moving him right now. It's like, yeah, they lost all their leverage at the draft. They didn't get the price they were after, and they lost it. But there's a huge amount of time left for that to happen. And the moment Marquise Brown, DeAndre Hopkins gets moved, Marquise Brown's ADP is going to jump from down here all the way up to about here. We saw it in games last season, how good he can play when he is the wide receiver 1. He can play near the line of scrimmage and he can play deep, and I have no concerns about that being with Colt McCoy. A couple of questions here in the chats. So from James, what's your preference between 2 QB and 3 QB builds? What are your thoughts on your own build at this stage? So I'm a big believer in 2 QB builds. I would rather have an elite quarterback early and then finish by, say, round 12 with my second quarterback. Sean Siegel of Rotoviz, like the Zero RB GOAT, he's wrote a lot about what he calls 2 quarterbacks in a window. And that can mean like, in a Super Bowl window or in a win now situation window where those quarterbacks have to do something. And that was the window that Tom Brady was in when he won his Super Bowl. And, Matthew Stafford that year where waiting on quarterback till that sort of like round 8 to round 12 range was really good. Last year we saw it with Justin Fields. He was one of those, and Trevor Lawrence. They were in a window where they needed to improve their stock, and they really did. So you won't ever see me wait past round 12 and then suddenly load up on 3 quarterbacks. It's just not how I build teams, unless absolutely something has gone wrong. In terms of this one, I quite like it. I mean, I would rather have an elite quarterback in there, but I like the value on Chubb and Mixon. I think both of those are going to see their ADPs climb. I think in terms of wide receiver room, I've got 4 studs who any of those could go off any given week. And with 3 wide receiver starts on DraftKings, it feels like I'm always going to be covered and one can slide down with flex and I have no worries there. So yeah, it's ticking over quite nicely. See Anthony Richardson go off there right around pick 88, which he's crept up when DraftKings opened the drafts. He was going around pick 100, and so he's kind of crept up a little bit. Definitely a few players I'd like to consider around here. I think James Conner's being crazily undervalued, particularly in this PPR format. We see him year after year do well and play above expectations. If it wasn't for injury last year, all the games he played, he did fantastic. So I've been taking quite a lot of James Conner. You can see I've got 10% of my draft so far. Again, that's thanks to Spike Week's overlays that are letting you see that. What have we got? So teams ahead of me, we've got one with a quarterback already, and then we've got 0 RB team, which that's a pure 0 RB team and really nice. Taking Tua for the Jalen Waddle stack. Very nice, very nice. I'm going to go with Kirk Cousins here just to sort of like hammer in that stack with Justin Jefferson. Just felt like the right time to do it and make sure that I wasn't left out in the cold. Back on the clock here. So we're at 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 4 wide receivers, and 1 tight end. Generally, by the time we get to round 10, I would like to have 5 wide receivers. So here, I'm going to reach down for Zay Flowers. People are still in their heads about the old Greg Roman offense and worrying that he won't see value, but Zay Flowers feels like a player that down the stretch could be huge. You know, he can play inside, he can play outside, and he could be really big. Good question from Will here in the chat. The Leone Manifesto and other research I've seen says 5 wide receivers in 10 rounds is essential in BBM. Does that need to be higher in PPR? Do you know? It's my preference for sure. Not sure if there's a rule. It's pretty much how I always try to attack things. I always feel like I hate the build. If I did a couple of drafts the other day where I started dual running backs. So, you know, you've got 2 running backs, players like I was starting with Bijan Robinson and Nick Chubb. And it feels excellent. And then you start piling up wide receivers, but right about kind of round 5, it all just dies. And you're suddenly looking at guys like Jerry Jeudy to be wide receiver 2, particularly if you want an elite quarterback. But generally speaking, yeah, if I can get to round 10, I've got 5 wide receivers. I feel that's going to be really strong, and I feel like that's going to carry me. And now I can kind of turn away from wide receiver a good bit, much like I'd expect this 0 RB team out of 103. I feel like they're not going to be hammering wide receiver anymore, and they can concentrate on other positions. And, you know, like many drafts on DraftKings, you know, we've got a wide variety of builds. One of the things I love about this Spike Week overlay, you can see what everyone's got. So we've got a 2-3-3-1 build there. So they've only got 3 wide receivers at the 1. Over here, 2-2-5-0, so 5 wide receivers again. And generally speaking, a lot of the teams have sort of got a minimum of 4, apart from this team here, which is 3-6-0-0, so 3 quarterbacks, 6 running backs, no tight ends, and no wide receivers. I don't want to say they're paying the rake, but it's not a format that I would recommend in doing that. Wide receivers are incredibly valuable. I wrote an article for Underdog recently talking about how 0 wide receiver, the idea of waiting till later, it just doesn't work. There's no evidence that it's ever worked, and I'll drop that link into the comments and the description later on. But the mindset is that you want the elite running backs, and then you can fill up on volume guys later on. But when you're down here taking guys like Brian Robinson, I'm just not sure what Brian Robinson's going to do for you. And if he is making you starting lineup ahead of guys like Austin Eckler, Travis Etienne, and DeAndre Swift, things have gone wrong on the roster somewhere, most likely. So we're coming back round, and I probably would have been looking to take a running back here, but a lot of my favourites seem to be going Smudgy P. Ryan, Damian Harris, Zach Charbonnet. I think they're all kind of nice targets. We've got a quarterback already, got the tight end in Kyle Pitts, so there's no real sense of urgency for any position, which just lets us go best position available here. 2 more picks away. Jameson Williams, somebody I haven't really drafted a lot of. I feel quite pessimistic about him after missing the entirety of last year and then coming back late. So he's not somebody I'll be going for here. And you can make an argument for somebody like Zay Jones. It's not really a particularly interesting part of the draft board. So I'm going to go with Rashad Penny. I've got a little more belief in Penny than I do in DeAndre Swift at cost. I think, DeAndre Swift, the Eagles clearly wanted to bring him in and clearly believe in what he can deliver. But it just feels a little icky. And then here, I'm going to go with Jamal Williams, who's with the Saints now. We just saw him score 17 touchdowns last season. So now I've got 4 running backs through kind of 12 rounds. What I'm probably going to do is I'm probably not going to take another running back till very late. And this is kind of similar to like a hyper fragile build, which when Justin Herzig, Best Ball Mania won back when we were talking about 50,000 people in a contest, and now where Best Ball's evolved to, and we're talking about 25,000 people in a contest already. So the idea behind hyper-fragile builds is that you take maybe 1 or 2 early in a total of 4, and you embrace the fragility of it, and you just deal with it. And I think between the 4 I've got, Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, they should be starting the majority of my games. Rashad Penny, if healthy, we know that he's a stud when healthy in terms of yards after contact and yards through contact. And Jamal Williams, it feels like there's an opportunity for him to score a lot of touchdowns in New Orleans. We saw Taysom Hill getting a lot of the work there. I thought you were going to smash Kyler there. So, yeah, it crossed my mind with Kyler, and I think that perhaps we're probably about a month away from getting positive news that sees his ADP jump. And then in about another month after that, we'll see his ADP start to come back down slightly. So it does worry me a little that he could miss a lot of time. And where we are, perhaps if it was sort of like a round 14 pick, then I'd be all over it. But right now, it just feels a little too high. Get Jay in the chat. Appreciate you, my man. Thank you to everyone who's here checking us out. And if you haven't already, please leave a like, leave a comment on the video. It really helps the video reach a wider audience. And also, if you haven't subscribed, I don't know why, because we have so many great guests coming on. We've got an awful lot of top people from the best ball and fantasy industry coming on. Rich keeps smashing out great dynasty content. Of course, he's in here saying he's not touching Kyler no matter the cost. And I can definitely understand that. I mean, look, I got burned pretty badly last year on J.K. Dobbins. I swallowed the hype when he was out there saying, you won't believe what me and God are cooking up. And I thought it was all going to be okay, and it wasn't. So generally speaking, I'm becoming a bit more, not risk averse, but when I do take players like that, I want to build them in a sensible way. We can see his team here at pick 11. They're just a dead team, wasting space. Just probably for shits and giggles. Kyler Murray is their 4th quarterback off the board. Yeah, whatever. Definitely got that. And then shout out to Alex in the chat as well. So we're kind of coming back up on round 12 pick. And obviously, I'm sat here with 1 quarterback at the minute. So if I can get another quarterback that kind of fits the build, I would. But equally, I feel like we're in a good place. Could add KJ Osborne to the stack. 1 pick before us. 2 QB team already, so I doubt we're going QB here. That 0 RB team is looking mighty fine, but 1 running back through 11 rounds, pretty dangerous. You see that Jared McKinnon coming off the clock there. So we'll take KJ Osborne, see what comes back around. It does feel like the right kind of time to be taking another quarterback. You can see Jordan Love, Matthew Stafford, Kenny Pickett. It's not beautiful. I think we can possibly consider Desmond Ridder for later, but right now I'm going to take Matthew Stafford. I feel like he's been undervalued slightly. I think we can add in some late options and some cheap options. Take Richard's boy Tutu and add him to the queue as well. So let's get back to the draft board so you can all see that. Kendry Miller going after Matthew Stafford. I like that. We've got Hannah here in the chat. How important are Week 17, final Week 17 matchups to you when you're drafting the best ball teams? Does it factor much into your draft strategy? There's two very good sides to the coin on this. There's the side of the coin that you look at Pat Crane's winning Best Ball Mania roster last year, and it was heavily correlated. He had lots of little mini stacks and little correlations. And that's generally how I'm going to go with things. I want those little correlations. I want them to be there to increase it, because we're talking about a 1,400 person final, and you are going to need little stacks and correlations and little spikes to come off where you might not be expecting them. But then the other side of things is, we can talk about the winning roster from last year. He had Russell Wilson and Jerry Jeudy. Then he had Kenneth Gainwell, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, but without Jalen Hurts. He had Mike Evans, which obviously Mike Evans came up big in Week 17 for people after not really showing up for the huge majority of the season. It was Juju Smith-Schuster, but he wasn't correlated with anyone. He was there in his winning lineup. And so I think it was kind of a good take a beat moment to see those two different lineups and say, okay, well, these are both large field contests. So what are we doing? What matters the most? And I lean to Week 17 as a tiebreaker. It's like stacking. It's like any kind of version of MicroStrategy where you want to say, we're going to look at this, and if I can take this as a tiebreaker now, then that feels good. What I have been doing in some of these early drafts is I've been adding in correlation between divisions. I put out an article on Underdog Network recently talking about teams who played each other a lot over recent, like the final 3 weeks of the season every year. So there are certain teams that just pop up time and time again. Over the last 4 years, the Vikings and the Packers have played each other 3 times in the last 3 weeks of the seasons. The Ravens and the Bengals have been in there for a couple of times. So those are the kind of bets to take this early in things. Let's see. So we're at pick 167 here. A little too early for anyone who I would be looking at in my queue. There's nobody from a running back perspective who I particularly like here, but I'm going to take Juwan Johnson. Perhaps I'm taking him over the Saints tight end one, Taysom Hill, but it feels like Juwan Johnson had more touchdowns than anyone apart from George Kittle and Travis Kelce last season. Yes, it's Derek Carr instead of Andy Dalton now, but Derek Carr's been productive with quarterbacks in the past. We've seen him be really good at times. So I believe that Juwan Johnson is going to play an awful lot as the true tight end. And, we're going to see Taysom Hill in for those kind of packages that we do see, and that'll be it for him. At wide receiver, that's probably where I lean here. We've got a 2-4-6-2 build at the minute. Don't particularly like too many of the running backs, but I will take Devin Singletary, and that's going to be the last running back I'll take here, because now we've got a running back room of Devin Singletary, Rashad Penny, Jamal Williams, Joe Mixon, and Nick Chubb. And that feels completely fine. It feels like that's going to keep us covered. As Will says, does that not mean that teams are less likely to play each other this time? It definitely could do. I mean, the scheduling, they're not just going to roll out Minnesota, Green Bay every week until the end of time. But there's a reason why we tend to put those teams there. It's rivalry, isn't it? So, you want those are the ones that really sell, You look at like the NFC West, or you look at teams like that, or the AFC North, and regardless of whether there's something on the line, those games tend to turn up big for TV ratings. I mean, look at the Bengals a few years back, preventing the Ravens from getting into the playoffs. So I'm not counting on the Packers to be playing the Vikings or anything like that, but it's just kind of like, it's worth knowing that there's just been little tendencies in the schedule like that. Chris coming up to his pick here. I'm running out of Cowboys. It's Jason Witten coming back. You can see Chris got a pretty heavy Dallas stack. He's got CD, he's got Dak Prescott, he's got Brandon Cooks, he's got Michael Gallup. And Michael Gallup at pick 133 feels like a really nice value this year. Like, yes, we all got burned a little bit by him last year as his recovery from injury was slow, but we have to kind of expect that sometimes. And this year, the discount feels nice, and particularly when he's going, 50 picks behind Brandon Cooks. Straight up, I'd rather Michael Gallup over Brandon Cooks. And if you look at my rankings on Fantasy Pros, you can see that there's quite a bit of a different, the gap is drastically closer than it is there. I've got Brad in the chat also saying, no way with Kyler, not even if there's a fire. I have to remember to not put Kyler in my queue at any point, just in case suddenly there's a fire. So you can see I've got a 2-5-6-2 build here, which I feel pretty good about. I don't feel like I'm desperately needing another wide receiver. Don't feel like I'm desperately needing another tight end here. We'll see what the board plays out with. You see Trey Lance going off there for the third quarterback in this build for I've Bills, who, unsurprisingly, I've Bills took Josh Allen and then took Brock Purdy and Trey Lance. Got a bit of a quarterback handcuff situation going on, which I don't mind at all. I mean, there's definitely realistic outcomes that Trey Lance could start the season and then Brock Purdy takes over. I think it's possibly the right way to play it. So we're one pick away. I'm going to take Desmond Ridder, so we'll make this a 3 quarterback build. So I've got Ridder there, stacked with Kyle Pitts, got Kirk Cousins stacked with Justin Jefferson and KJ Osborne. So it feels quite nice in terms of how my stacks are lining up. I'm not going too heavy with my stacks at this point in the season. And then back to us here. We'll take Van Jefferson here at the 202. I mean, you look at the Rams receiving depth chart, and it's Cooper Kupp, Ben Skowronek, Van Jefferson, Tutu Atwell, the rookie whose name I can't remember, who they took later on. And it isn't deep whatsoever. This is a soft rebuild for the Rams. They're kind of trying to retool on the fly. Cooper Kupp, you can write in for a huge amount, probably talking 30% target share again this season. Van Jefferson, he was injured to start the year last year. We don't know how much that affected him. But then when he came back, Matthew Stafford's issues started to play up. So I'm kind of hopeful that Van Jefferson, particularly in best ball, this late on in drafts, can be a good value this year. So what have we got? Khalil Shakir going there to the I've Bills. I quite like that pick. I think Khalil Shakir is a sneaky, almost under radar pick right now. He's somebody who he could take a lot of slot snaps that Isaiah McKenzie failed to take last year. Will Rams trash? We'll allow it, but very value. I'm definitely saying that. Sam Howell going off the clock there to Michael Heary's team. Michael, a very smart guy, does some really good data visualization work over at Established to Run. He's got a Lamar Jackson start, then thrown in Mac Jones and Sam Howell late. The Mac Jones, Tyquan Thornton stack seems to be a really popular one at the minute. It's everyone's kind of get out of jail late on stack, It allows you to go elite quarterback early, pile up on wide receivers and running backs. You can see Michael took 9 wide receivers total. He's got those 5 running backs, not over-invested in them. And then, The only position he's kind of in a bit of a bind is tight end, but he's got that Hunter Henry stack with Mac Jones, and I'd guess Michael's probably looking at another 2 tight ends to finish out his draft. Typically waiting on tight end, it doesn't have a great success rate, but if there's one position where things could be completely unpredictable and, could buck the trend, then tight end is definitely that. Richie James going here to this team, which looks dead and buried to me, is I like Richie James. I think he had a great season last year with the Giants, and the Chiefs are crying out for a good slot receiver who can command targets and really, take the ball often. And would it surprise anyone if Richie James had another good season with Patrick Mahomes? It could happen. Michael in the chat saying, just can't get my head around it this year. Yeah, every year it feels like you need a good month or so to kind of get your head around where the positions are going and just get used to stuff. And I think I speak to a lot of people who perhaps aren't as high volume drafters as myself, or people not wanting to put as much money in. And it's good to just get in the DraftKings $1 drafts. If you haven't signed up for DraftKings already, check out the description below. There's a referral link. You'll get $20 free. It's well worth doing. The $1 drafts are good fun. We've got Will just clarifying the Rams defense is trash. The offense will need to stay on the field. This is a Pro Cup message. 100%. I fully agree. Moving on from Jalen Ramsey, they're just kind of caught in all kinds of a situation, really. It's very difficult to work out exactly what they want to do. We've got Caldwell 1 pick before us, currently with a 2.591 build. You'd think they're probably looking for a tight end somewhere around here. I've got my boy Gus Edwards just staring at me. You can see I got 30% exposure in the kind of 10, 11 drafts I've already done. But I'm going to take Hayden Hurst. Typically, I would prefer correlate my tight ends, have them part of stacks. But, we've got Desmond Ridder with Kyle Pitts. We've got Kirk Cousins with Jefferson and KJ Osborne. And then, we're just kind of flying solo with Hayden Hurst there. It's not too bad. And Juwan Johnson skinny as well. So on the turn, James Robinson. Rich is advocating for Tim Patrick. Don't mind me some Tim Patrick. I'm easily persuaded at times, so let's drop him in the queue. I think, if Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton's moved on, there's a very good chance that Tim Patrick is suddenly going to see an awful lot of work. As Rich says, Sean Payton will love Patrick. And I think so. I mean, it seemed like Tim Patrick really was going to be the guy last year, but it just never, didn't get the chance to play out that way. So kind of rounding down to these last couple of rounds, this is kind of where you take your flyers. I mean, this is an area where I've had heavy exposure to some pretty awful players at times over the years. Players like James Prochet last year. Don't need to dive into that too heavy. In terms of my build, I'm really pleased with it. 3-5-8-3. I don't need a quarterback. I don't need a running back. I don't need a tight end. So we'll get back to it. DraftKings, full PPR, those bonuses. Just going to be looking for another wide receiver here. Obviously, we've got Tutu Atwell in the queue, but I'm not sure I can pull the trigger on that. It's Isaiah McKenzie. You could make an argument that he's going to be the slot receiver for the Colts. He's more of a veteran than Josh Downs, who could take some time to come along. I'm not downplaying Josh Downs' ceiling, but there could be a good portion of the season where McKenzie is the slot receiver. You got Noah Brown, who has definitely flashed moments. Marcus Callaway, who Sean Payton brought to Denver. Swagnew, he had great moments for Jaguars, but I'm not sure I can pull it now with Calvin Ridley there. Yeah, gets a little get on the terrace. Let's see. So we're 13 picks away. Taylor Heineke going 2 picks before Ryan Tannehill. Taylor Heineke, there's a good chance he could end up starting a bunch of games in Atlanta ahead of Desmond Ridder. I'm by no means a big fan of Desmond Ridder. I think the Falcons are on a one-way ticket to a hiding this year. But I probably would have taken Ryan Tannehill ahead of him. I think it's kind of very much takes depends on what you really value. Got Rich asking, is it booty time? It's not booty time, and it's not going to be booty time. And we'll have very limited exposure to him. I think he's a very interesting player. And if you've watched any of our videos, you'll know that Rich is very high on Keishon Boutte. And this time a year ago, he was being hyped as a first-round pick. And what could have been, but right now, it just doesn't seem to be a very good chance that he's going to be playing meaningful snaps week in, week out. Isaiah McKenzie going ahead of me. This team here just continues to, 4-6-7-3 is very much an unusual build. You can see that after going running back so heavy, they've gone Sky Moore, DJ Chark, Nicole Harmon, Josh Palmer, Richie James, Darius Slayton, Corey Davis. Look, I mean, any strategy can work in best ball. That's the beauty of best ball, and we get so much variance year to year. But it's not a strategy I would try very often. It's probably one way of saying it. Jamal Agnew going. I mean, just, all my guys here. Gus Edwards gone. If Tutu Atwell goes, I mean, then I tell you guys really just here to crap all over me. We'll draft Tutu Atwell. He did flash at moments last year. I don't particularly like it. I don't really see huge amounts of value in adding to a stack with your 20th round pick. It gets to a point where the board isn't particularly pretty, doesn't it? So there we go. You can see I had 3-5-9-3, Justin Jefferson, Nick Chubb, Devonta Smith, Keenan Allen, Joe Mixon, Kyle Pitts, Marquise Brown, Kirk Cousins, Zay Flowers, Rashad Penny, Jamal Williams, KJ Osborne, Matthew Stafford, Juwan Johnson, Devin Singletary, Desmond Ridder, Van Jefferson, Hayden Hurst, Tim Patrick, Tutu Atwell. What are we saying? Is this the team that wins $1 million 7 months from now? Or are we talking about, let's see, you've got Chris's team on the end, Deft Angel, CD Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Mark Andrews, Christian Kirk, Chris Godwin, Cam Akers, Dak Prescott, Brandon Cooks, Magic P. Ryan, AJ Dillon, Raheem Mostert, Mike Gallup, Jordan Love, Irv Smith, Rondale Moore, Jaden Reed, Kareem Hunt, Luke Musgrave, Pierre Strong, and Quez Watkins. I really like that one. It's a really nice team. It's drafted nicely within structure. We've got, let's see what else. We've got Michael's team, 3-5-9-3, Saquon Barkley, Devontae Adams to start, Lamar Jackson, Debo. Debo's somebody that I think a lot of people are going to be divided on, but you're going to see him slip to a point where he's a nice value at times. Aaron Jones, Michael Pittman, Cortland Sutton, Jahan Dotson. I mean, he could be huge this year, Jahan Dotson. Just imagine what Jacoby Brissett's going to do for his value. Juju Smith-Schuster, Bateman, Gibson, Jacoby Myers, now in Vegas with Jimmy G. Jaylen Warren. I have so much Jaylen Warren. I've taken Jaylen Warren in like 7 of the 11 drafts I've done on here so far. Perhaps that's just me being pessimistic about Najee Harris, but I really think Jaylen Warren's ADP is one we're going to look back on and say he was undervalued. And then, of course, Patriots stack, and then hitting the tight ends heavy to finish out. So we'll call that there. That'll be the end of this one. But please, if you're not subscribed already, do hit subscribe. I really can't say enough how many great guests we've got coming on over the next few weeks. Rich's Dynasty content's going to keep grinding. We'll keep doing these. I'll keep doing solo shows now and again. I'm bringing on people who might not be quite as big names, but people I feel like you should know. And shout out to you if you've been here. I really appreciate you being in the chat. Hit the like button. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you thought. And we're going to be back real soon.